Welcome to the November 20th, 2025 meeting of the Ann Arbor Renters Commission. The purpose of the Renters Commission is to advise the City Council and the City Administrator in matters affecting renters in the city. The Ann Arbor Renters Commission is made up of voting members who are appointed by the mayor and approved by City Council, two non-voting member, two non-voting City Council liaisons, two non-voting members representing different landlord perspectives, and a non-voting representative to the University of Michigan Student Legal Services. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, you'll be able to speak through the webinar link or by phone, depending on your method of access to this meeting. To be called on to speak, callers must press *9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link a2gov.org/renters commission meeting. You'll then be called upon by city staff one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by username if available for those accessing through the web link. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. Please state your name at the beginning of your comments. City staff will indicate when the callers have 30 seconds left of their 3-minute comment period. After 3 minutes, they'll be placed on mute so that we can proceed to the next speaker. Moving on to roll call. Please state the city and state that you're calling from. Commissioner Ratcliffe, I'm here. Commissioner Larsenes.
Here in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Thank you. Commissioner Body.
Here in Ann Arbor as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Here in Ann Arbor too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Commissioner Rosen.
I'm here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Els.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Droppelman.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. And Commissioner Pace.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Pitts is not here yet. Commissioner Liao is absent tonight. And our two council members are also absent tonight as well. So we will move forward again, we'll have to wait for the approval of the agenda and approval of the minutes from the last several meetings and just move forward to the first general public comment.
All right. Right, to speak during public comment, to address the Renters Commission about any topic for up to 3 minutes, go ahead and raise your hand now. If you are calling in, you can press *9 to raise your hand. If you are joining with the web link, you can use the raise hand feature. Staff will promote you into the meeting, and then you will be called on to speak. You'll have up to 3 minutes. We'll indicate when there are 30 seconds left. If there's anybody who would like to speak to the Renters Commission, go ahead and raise your hand now. All right, Rosanita, there are a few folks in there, but nobody's raised their hands. So we can go ahead and close.
Okay, then we'll move on to the unfinished business, which is an update on the ordinance to create rental transparency and eliminate, is it junk fees? Sorry, I'm just trying to go to the update from Councilmember Radina. He said that they're getting close to finalizing the final draft, and that staff believe that they should be able to hit the target of introducing the ordinance at the December 2nd council meeting. He said that he and Gail are meeting with the city attorneys on Monday to discuss some of their suggested clarifying language to incorporate recommended changes and to discuss any final edits. Commissioner Rosen, can you let us know about what those may be?
Yeah, I don't know. I got a request today to join the meeting, so I need to get the most recent draft of the ordinance before I can provide any information. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Hopefully then we'll have an update after that meeting on Monday. Unfortunately, next week is a holiday week, and so
I can send
I
you an
guess
update. I can send you an update after the meeting if that would be helpful.
that would thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? I don't have more information, unfortunately. Okay, then we will move on to, sorry, the next item on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is new business, the first being the presentation from the Housing Commission. And Jennifer Hall, who is in charge of the Housing Commission, is here. Thank you for coming tonight and giving us this presentation.
Thank you for having me. I have a couple of my staff. I see Wanisha Brand is in the meeting, Mindy Van Huffel and Lisa Levan. If they're in the waiting room, could promote them too, if you don't mind. So we have yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say Kristen is doing that now.
All right, thanks, Kristen. Appreciate it. For those who don't know me, I'm the director of the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. Wanisha Brand is our deputy director. And Mindy is a manager in our voucher program, and Lisa is a manager in our housing program. So we should be able to answer all of your questions between the four of us. We created a presentation for the Human Rights Commission last week that I think really is appropriate for you all as well. We're going to talk about what our organization does, how our programs work, and then a little bit about what's going on or what we see is going on in the housing market. And then happy to entertain any questions that anybody might have. Okay, I will share my screen. Okay, so for folks who have always wondered what is the definition of affordable housing, since we are primarily a HUD funded organization, we go by the federal government's definition, which is that if you pay more than 30% of your gross household income on your housing costs, that includes rent and utilities, or if you're a homeowner, your mortgage, et cetera, then you're considered cost burdened. And clearly, if you have a low income, like if you're only making, $12,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year versus somebody making a couple $100,000 a year, you're going to be more cost burdened in life. Your life is going to feel more cost burdened, even if you pay 30% of your income on your housing costs than somebody with a higher income. There's a new definition in sort of planning circles that communities like Ann Arbor, where housing is so expensive, people end up moving farther and farther away from their place of work, for example, if they work in the city of Ann Arbor, in order to find affordable housing, but that ends up adding transportation costs. And so if you're spending more than 45% of your income on housing and transportation, you are also considered cost burdened. What is the income level in the Ann Arbor area? So we are considered part of the Ann Arbor Primary Metropolitan Statistical Area, which is actually the entire Washtenaw County. And all of the HUD programs and many federal programs, they use the area median income as the income levels for various programs. And so the reason the 4-person household is circled for 100% of median income is $125,900 is the median income for 2025 for our area, Washtenaw County. Every other number that's in this chart is a formula. It's a formula based off of 125,900. So nobody went out to look and see what's happening with 1-person households versus 3-person households. All it is the median income is stuck in the column for 4 people at median income. However, any program that we have that has a income cap, this is the chart we use. So for our voucher program, which Wanisha will talk about later, 50% of median income is the income cap. And the reason 60% of median income is highlighted is because that is the income target or less that the city has for most of its programs, like a brownfield TIF that triggers affordable housing, or zoning that triggers affordable housing, or the affordable millage. Those are all geared towards 60% of median income or less. And so if you take this chart and you say, okay, well, how much would somebody spend if they were spending 30% of their income on housing? These are the numbers. And you might look at this and say, holy cow, that's way more expensive than I would have expected for, quote, affordable housing. And that is 100% due to the fact that our median income is so high. We're extremely high, as people know who live here, compared to other communities, far higher than the rest of Michigan, far higher than the United States. And so when you take these AMIs and you convert them into rental amounts or home ownership amounts, this is the highest we could charge, for example, for rent and utilities on housing that's geared towards 60% AMI. And even though it's broken down by person, we actually break our rents down by apartments. So you could be 1 or 2 people in a 1-bedroom apartment, for example. I'm just throwing this chart in, not because you can read it, just because the state of Michigan, they have the biggest affordable housing program that they administer for the IRS. It's called Low-Income Housing Tax Credits. And this is the chart that we have to go to when we're looking at what we can charge by bedroom size, what the maximum amount we can charge by bedroom size, and income target. And so I'm just there for information. I will send this whole presentation to Kristen, and she can share it with you all if you're curious to look at it. So who is the Ann Arbor Housing Commission? We're actually a department of the city. We have multiple areas that we work in. We own and manage and operate our own housing. We have a very large voucher program. We have the largest voucher program in Washtenaw County. We have a family self-sufficiency and a home ownership program, which Wanisha manages those programs, so she can go into more detail if you're interested. I'll just quickly say that you could actually take a rental voucher, and instead of paying your landlord rent, you could actually get a bank loan, buy a house, and you can use your voucher to pay your mortgage instead of paying your rent. So we have a program that allows you to do that. What I don't have in here is our development arm of our agency, and we currently are in the process of either developing ourselves or supporting other developers. 1,200 units either already built or in the pipeline since the city adopted the affordable housing millage in 2020. This just shows you the sort of mix of bedroom sizes that we have. The vast majority of our housing that we own has a rental subsidy attached to every one of those units, because the vast majority of the housing that we own used to be public housing. And so the HUD allowed housing authorities to change the way that their public housing was funded by changing it to something called project-based vouchers. What is the difference? It's just a different line item in HUD's budget. You may have heard of the disinvestment in public housing all across the United States. It's now out of favor from a political perspective in the HUD budget, and HUD shifted to the voucher program in the mid 1980s, and that is what is better funded at the HUD level, at the federal level. And so we participated in converting our public housing to what's called project-based vouchers. It has no impact really on our residents. They still pay 30% of their income on rent. They still have us as their property manager. It's just that we are better funded at the federal level than the public housing program. We do have some properties we've acquired, like Lurie Terrace, where we have 136 apartments, all senior. It was market rate. Well, it was below market rate, but it wasn't restricted in any way toward income or rent when we bought it. And then after we bought it, we restricted the rents, we restricted the incomes, and we added 30 project-based vouchers. So that's a property where not everyone has a rental assistance. Where are properties located? A lot of them sort of clustered in Ward 5, if that matters to you. It usually matters to our council persons, doesn't really matter to us as owners and managers, other than, we would like to have, as we develop new housing, we would like it to be in all parts of the city. So we definitely have big gaps in Ward 2 and Ward 1, the northeast side of the city. We would love to add more housing there. We work with a lot of different community partners, a lot of nonprofits to provide both free and voluntary services for our residents. They do not have to participate if they do not want to, but these are just some of the different agencies and a wide variety of different services depending on the location where someone lives. And I am going to turn it over to Anisha. She is going to talk about the voucher program and how that works.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, everyone. So I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have heard of the voucher program, and I'm going to talk about the details of how the voucher program works. So the Department of HUD provides funding directly to the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, which is called a PHA, a public housing agency. They provide funding directly to us to provide funding to our program participants. As a housing authority with a housing choice voucher program, we have the opportunity to decide what jurisdiction we'll cover. The Ann Arbor Housing Commission covers the jurisdiction of Washtenaw County and Monroe County. We have a handful of families that are in the western area of Wayne County. We previously serviced that area, but we removed it from our jurisdiction some years ago. However, the families that continue to remain in those units still reside there. However, if they decide to relocate, they would have to relocate into one of the two jurisdictions that we currently cover. So the voucher program, as I mentioned, it's federally funded by HUD, and the intention of the program is to assist low-income families, specifically low-income families, and they focus on elderly or disabled individuals to provide assistance in the private housing market. The chart on the side provides some information about the Housing Choice Voucher Program nationwide. These figures are not a depiction of the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. So how we administer the program is, as I mentioned, HUD provides us directly with funding. We pull individuals off of our wait list to determine if they are eligible according to the income guideline. So eligibility simply requires that a family does not exceed the 50% area median income. And as long as that family is eligible for assistance, they are issued a voucher. Once they are issued the voucher, they go out into the private market of our jurisdiction and place a housing application with a private landlord. That private landlord would then determine that the person is fit for leasing and complete documentation that's provided by the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. The Ann Arbor Housing Commission would then complete 3 assessments, one to determine whether or not the unit rent and utility responsibility is affordable for the family. We will then do another assessment to ensure that the rent that the landlord is charging is comparable to similar units in the surrounding area. And we will also complete an HQS inspection. Once the unit passes those 3 levels of testing, then the family is approved to sign the lease with the landlord. Once that lease is signed with the landlord, the Housing Commission will sign a contract, what is called a Housing Assistance Payment or HAP contract with the landlord, and the Housing Commission will make our payment directly to our portion of the rent payment directly to the landlord, and the tenant is responsible for making their portion of the rent payment directly to the landlord. Are there any questions about that before I go any further? Okay, thank you. As Jennifer mentioned, we have over 2,300 vouchers that we administer throughout Washtenaw and Wayne County. Occasionally, HUD will solicit applications for what they call special purpose vouchers. And these vouchers will be directly targeted to a very specific population. For example, we have 278 VASH vouchers, Veteran Affairs Supportive Housing vouchers. These vouchers are very specific to provide housing assistance to homeless veterans. We also have the non-elderly disabled voucher program. This program is very specific to individuals that are between the ages of 18 and 61 who are disabled. The family unification vouchers. These vouchers are very specific to families that are in jeopardy of losing custody of their children as a result of housing inadequacy, or because it is a adult foster youth that has aged out of the foster care system. Emergency housing vouchers. These vouchers were awarded to the Housing Commission around the time of COVID, I believe around 2020. These vouchers are very specific to homeless individuals or individuals who experience housing inadequacies as a result of domestic violence. The RAD project-based vouchers, again, these are the vouchers that are specifically placed on properties that we own. Jennifer explained this. These are the properties that the Housing Commission owned that were previously identified as public housing units, and they have since been converted over to RAD project-based vouchers. We also have foster youth initiative vouchers. Again, these vouchers are very specific to foster children that have aged out of the system and have housing inadequacies, as well as tenant protection vouchers. Tenant protection vouchers are vouchers that were offered to individuals that reside with a private landlord that previously had some sort of HUD loan that has since expired. And as a result of that loan or program expiring for that private landlord, the tenant is now going to experience a dramatic rent increase. Therefore, they now have protections by the use of a voucher to ensure that they are not displaced as a result of that HUD contract terminating. Go to the next slide.
Before we leave this slide, I just wanted to point out the map. The map, you'll see the pink dot. So the larger the dot, the more people live at that particular location. And so we are the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. But if we were only limited to serving households in the city of Ann Arbor, we would not be able to lease up all of our vouchers. People can only lease up a voucher where the rent is within the size of the voucher they have available to them. So you can see that about 2/3 of our vouchers are not used in the city of Ann Arbor, particularly our tenant-based vouchers where people are trying to find a place to live.
So how the rent is determined. And this goes into further explanation about unit affordability. So there is a misconception that landlords are not able to charge a market rent. for their units if they choose to lease it to a Section 8 family. I'm sorry, a housing choice voucher family. And that's actually not true. They absolutely can charge the market rent. So the landlord will determine how much the monthly rent is for the unit. Again, as I mentioned, the Housing Commission will do a comparison to ensure that the rent that they're charging is similar to comparable units in the area. And from that point, again, we will ensure that the unit is affordable for the family. So as Jennifer mentioned, the unit has to fit the family's voucher. We determine a payment standard, which is an average amount of subsidy that we will provide to each of our families depending on their family size. And if the family has income, it also adjusts the amount of the voucher. So as a result of that, you have some families that are shopping because they have zero income. They're simply shopping or looking for a unit that is within the actual voucher amount, which is 100% of the Housing Commission subsidy. Those other families that have a source of income, their income plus a portion of the Housing Commission subsidy is added together and allow them to shop for units that are slightly more expensive. So very specifically, when we talk about affordability for a housing choice voucher family, we're more so talking about the affordability for each individual family and not talking about affordability in regards to the rent that the landlord is charging. I just want to make sure that we're making it clear that landlords are able to charge a market rent. However, if the market rent is too expensive, it may not fit within the family's voucher. So in general, our families are going to pay 30% of their income towards the rent, and the Housing Commission will pick up the balance, that 70%. And together, the Housing Commission and the tenant will make 100% of the rental payment directly to the landlord. So these are just some of the facts about the HCV program that are widely widely misunderstood amongst the community. So the landlord can charge families the same amount of rent that they charge program participating families. Landlords are able to use their own screening criteria to determine whether or not an HCV family would be approved for that unit. HCV families are bound by the terms of the rental agreement as well as any state and local laws. They're subject to eviction the same as a non-HCV or program participant. And renting units to HCV families does not itself obligate a landlord to rent all of their units to HCV families. Again, owners should follow their screening process and comply with the terms of the Fair Housing Act as well as any local or state laws.
Oops. And we can pause here to see if there's any questions about our programs that anybody might have before we talk about the marketplace.
Okay.
All right, this chart is called Fair Market Rents. It is also something that HUD publishes every year. We don't set the rents that Wenisha was talking about. We don't require landlords to set their rents by fair market rents, but it is a good indicator of what's happening in the marketplace because basically HUD looks at your marketplace and does the 40 percentile of rents for all units that are in your marketplace except for subsidized units and units that are 2 years old or less. And so it's just kind of looking at what's happening in your marketplace. And you can see there's a gradual increase and there was a dip during the economic downturn in 2009. And then you can see it's really spiking over the last about 7-8 years. This map is showing where poverty is by census tract in Washtenaw County. And usually when with people in person, I'll ask them, What looks odd about this map? But since we're on Zoom, it's a little harder to do. So in your mind, think about what looks odd, and I'll tell you what it is. So if you look at this map, the thing that I think is odd is where the purple is in Ann Arbor. I like to tell people we really don't have high poverty in Ann Arbor, even though the census tract is showing that. Why is that? Because those purple areas were primarily on campus. And even at Washtenaw Community College, EMU, you saw that around their campuses. The vast majority of, quote, people who are in poverty are age 18 to 24. So how is that defined? So if the census comes to your house and you're a student and they say, how much is your income? And you say $5,000 a year. Well, you meet the level of poverty according to the census. And that's why it looks like that. So what I like to do is I like to look at where are the households who are on public assistance, because that's a much better indicator of people that are actually in poverty. And when you look at those maps, you look at this map, it changes very much, and there's a much higher concentration of poverty in and around the city of Ypsi than there is in the city of Ann Arbor. And what is causing the marketplace to be what it is? Why are all the poor people living in and around the city of Ypsi? The biggest driver of our marketplace is the University of Michigan and the healthcare system by far. This is an indicator of how many employees are employed. They dwarf, the next 20 biggest employers is the University of Michigan, and impacts not just the city of Ann Arbor, it has impacts on the rest of the marketplace, the rest of the county as well. And if you look at U of M's enrollment, their student population, compared to the amount of housing that the university has built, that's pretty much stayed steady until very recently, which I give them kudos for the amount of housing that they're currently adding to the marketplace with the new dorms that they're building. But by far, the biggest demand is coming from students, which are mainly captive audiences because most of them want to live in and around where their classes are. Although if you were to take the bus from downtown and ride it down Packard and into Ypsilanti, you will see students getting off on the far side of the county, living in far away because that's where they can afford to live. The one thing about the university's housing policy, when I've had conversations with folks, is that they've always said that they don't want to take properties off the tax rolls. This has historically been the case. They don't want to take properties off the tax rolls to provide housing for students. They let the private market respond to the demand, and that's why you have seen such a demand for folks who don't like the fact that there's high-rise student housing going up, but that is where literally the demand is. That is the only way that it was being provided for many years until very recently, and that is what we call in the development world the type of housing that you can pencil out, where you can generate enough revenue from rent to be able to pay for your cost, is literally with the student housing, where you have often like 6 bedrooms with a shared, each has their own bathroom, and you have a shared living and kitchen space. Again, just another map showing the mirroring of the population with the university. And I'm going to talk a little bit real quick about development. So if there's such a need for affordable housing or any kind of housing in the marketplace, why isn't it getting built? Like, what's the difference? Why is market rate housing getting built and not affordable? So the two graphs, this graph is just showing the cost of development for a market rate versus an affordable. You can see they're pretty much the same. Like, I gotta buy land, a market rate developer has to buy land, I have to hire an architect and pay for lumber and steel and windows and doors, and so does the market rate developer. The biggest differences between the two is we have a little more what we call soft costs, like fees, like Like, for example, paying attorney's fees is a lot more expensive when you do complicated affordable housing development deals. And we pay our developers to develop, whereas on the market rate side, the developer often gets paid over time as a return on their investment. So what does that look like when you're looking at how the developments are paid for? So if you pay attention to the orange, that is debt. And the blue is what we call equity or cash. So if anybody's ever bought their own home, you put 20% down typically, and you take out a loan of 80% of the value. And that's first in simplistically explaining what happens in market rate developments. It's mostly financed with debt. And then you have the investor, the owner, pulling investors who put in equity. When you do affordable housing development, the biggest source of affordable housing development subsidy is not HUD. HUD almost provides no money for development. Like, we can't go out and apply for money from HUD. It just doesn't exist anymore. The single biggest source of funding is called low-income housing tax credits, and it's actually an IRS program. And basically, there's a allocation to every state. The state of Michigan administers it for the state, and it's competitive. There's a limited pool of funds, and we have to all apply and compete for these tax credits. Now, when we are awarded tax credits, we don't pay taxes. We don't have a business tax. We're a governmental entity, and we're a nonprofit entity. And so we sell our tax credits for cash to an investor. And so that blue equity is very big, but it's us selling our tax credits to an investor for cash, and then we take out a loan for the balance of the funds. If we were to do a development for all the households at 60% AMI, we could pretty much make it work with 30-40% debt and about 60-70% in equity from tax credits. The lower the income that we're trying to target, if we're trying to target some 30% or 40% or 50% AMI, we have to add grant money because our rents have to be lower. If our rents are lower, the only way you pay debt is with the rent that you have. And so what does that look like on the operating side? This is what it looks like. On the far left is a market rate development. These are all developments of the same size, let's say 75 units. Because it's market rate, they're collecting a lot more rent. But you'll notice operations are very similar, but because we have a lot of regulatory requirements, income certifications, et cetera, our operating costs are more expensive than the market rate side. But the biggest difference is how much debt has to be paid back with rent. The second biggest difference you'll see is a large amount of taxes by the market rate side and virtually no taxes. You can't even see them on this chart in Ann Arbor because we have a pilot payment in lieu of taxes where we only pay $1 per unit per year for our affordable properties. And that allows us to target these much lower incomes. How do you put together development sources? How do you put your capital stack together? This is just a roughly 8-year period where I just added up all the different funding sources that we used in our LIHTC financing deals. You can see more than half was from this IRS program, debt, and then we had a few small HUD special grants that were available that aren't available anymore. And this doesn't include the city's affordable housing millage because that was adopted in 2020, but it takes a lot of time to put all these funding sources together, and they all have their own regulatory requirements, so it's extremely complicated to do affordable housing development. It cannot be built without public support, whether that's local, state, or federal, whether that's grants, low interest loans, free land, et cetera. Like, there's all kinds of ways, lower taxes, that you can support affordable housing. So I do want to highlight some of the affordable housing that we are in the process of either we are developing or we are supporting other developers to develop through the city's affordable housing millage. So we actually have not very many built because it takes a long time from the idea, the concept to people moving in is 5 to 7 years for new construction. So it takes a long time to get through the site plan approval and all your financing, et cetera. And then you got to build it. But we've got over 1,000 that are currently under development in some stage. I think that might be my last slide. I can't remember. Let me see here. Yep. And I'll just also say that a couple of these sites are properties that are being built on city-owned land. So, for example, the 63 units at Dunbar Tower is currently under construction on the corner of Catherine and 4th, right across from the farmers market. And it will be done and we'll be moving people in this February. And so that was sold to us by the city for $1. So that's an example of, a publicly owned, non-tax property being utilized for affordable housing. All right, it's the end of our presentation, and any one of us four are happy to answer any questions that anybody has. Should I call on people or is somebody else doing that?
I'll call.
Okay.
Well, I'll ask one question and then let other people ask. When I was looking at the map, I saw how most of the housing units seem to be in Ypsi and in Ann Arbor. Are there more developments happening in other parts of the county?
Are you talking about this map?
It was this map, and then I think there was like another map as well, but I mean, it basically had shown the same thing that most of the vouchers seem to be used, like I said, here in Ann Arbor or in kind of Ypsi Township area, and like I didn't really see any in Chelsea or Dexter. And I was just wondering if there was a reason why most of it seemed to be here. Is that because of where the jobs are located, or um,
Yeah, it's a
did it
combination.
have to kind of do with pre-state law where of who had to accept vouchers?
Less so the latter than all right, well, we'll break this down. Okay, so in case people didn't know, there's now a state law that you are not allowed to discriminate against a applicant to your housing simply because of their quote source of income, and a voucher under that law is considered a source of income, even though it's not their income, it's contributing, as a funding source to pay for rent. Prior to that, that was passed, I want to say, was that last year? When you said this year or last year? Can't remember now. Might have been this year. Yeah. And
I just know it went into effect this year.
yeah, I think it was just passed this year. And so before that, both the city of Ypsi and the city of Ann Arbor had their own local ordinance against discrimination based on source of income. That doesn't mean that there aren't ways that a landlord ends up not renting to voucher holders because of their tenant screening policies. So you can have a tenant screening policy as long as you apply it to all of your applicants. For example, where it has a certain minimum credit score, or they look at your previous history with prior landlords that you've lived in. Those are two examples. I'm sure my staff can come up with more. And so somebody who doesn't have good credit, who's low income, with or without a voucher, are less likely to be able to get into that housing. So that is probably something that you all wouldn't see a blatant and obvious, like it used to be that landlords would say, we don't accept vouchers. Well, they can't say that anymore, but they have other ways to be more subtle in screening people out. On the question of why and where development is happening, there's multiple things that impact development. One is local zoning and community support for affordable housing. Like right now, there's a city-owned property or village, I guess, in the village of Chelsea that they issued an RFP. They've got a developer doing affordable housing. First time I've seen them do that. So it depends on your political climate, but also these funding sources that I showed you, those multiple funding sources, they almost all prioritize, are you on transit, public transit? Are you near employment centers? You know, they all have their own rules, but a lot of it ends up pushing people. I don't know if this word's pushing, but you know, it ends up, the developers end up scoring higher if they're in an urban area where it has, you know, various benefits in that community. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hannah?
Yeah, I have a few questions. The first is about the voucher program. It was mentioned that landlords could charge market rate, and then the Housing Commission will compare it to other similar units to determine if it is reasonable. What resources are used to use for the comparison to determine if it's a not necessarily fair market rate, but reasonable given the market?
Thanks, Hannah. There's a database called the Housing Locator, and it's built of a number of units that are entered into the database from the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, as well as other housing authorities, as well as private landlords. So that's the system that we use right now to complete our comparables. And if we have any issues with that particular database, which in general we don't, because there's literally thousands of units built into that database, we can also use just a regular old Google search, Zillow, Realtor.com, platforms like that.
Thank you. I had a couple questions about the low-income housing tax credits. So are the developments through the Housing Commission that use the low-income housing tax credits, are they kept at affordable rates in perpetuity?
That's a really good question. We, as the Housing Commission, keep them, we put a deed restriction on so that they are affordable in perpetuity, primarily because we're a governmental entity, but also because we always end up using local government funds. And so that's our commitment to the community. Like if we're going to use the millage, we're going to have permanent affordability. The tax credits, the IRS regulations require a minimum of 15 years. Because the first wave of these LIHTC funded projects that started getting to the end of their first 15 years, like in the early 2000s, were able to immediately convert to market rate after they ended their regulatory period, and did. We lost thousands of apartments that were used to be affordable. MISHDA, the state of Michigan, has since required a minimum of 30 years, and if you commit to 45 years when you apply, you get extra points, but we always do permanent.
Thanks. And I have one last question. So I know with the low-income housing tax credits, the minimum was 30% of the area median income. What are the strategies for reaching people who are below 30% of the area median income? Do they have to rely on vouchers? Do they have to rely on nonprofit support?
Yeah, that's another really good question. When I have really long presentations, I talk about the fact that when you do these affordable housing developments, you are providing rents at below market rate rents. So if you go back to that original chart and you look at those income targets, it's below market rate rents. I am in no way guaranteeing that you're going to pay 30% of your income on rent. The only way to do that is to combine a LIHTC deal with project-based vouchers. And so that's what we do. That's what like nonprofits like Avalon does, other mission-based nonprofits, and even our for-profit private developers, which is the biggest developer of affordable housing. They would love it when people have vouchers, when they combine them into their tax credit deals, because they're already income certifying people. They already are targeting lower income households.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jordan?
I was just wondering, like looking specifically at this, what is the biggest group that we feel like isn't being, I mean, there's obviously a problem with having many unhoused people who are not being served, but which one, looking at this graphic, like which one of these demographics are you seeing the biggest like not coverage for? People are calling constantly, like which of these populations are being worst served by our system, just out of curiosity?
I'm going to say something and then I'll let my staff say something.
Okay.
From a homeless population perspective right now, the biggest increase has been families with kids. And then I'll let the rest of my staff see if there's anything more specific you want to add.
I'm unmuted. I would agree. Homeless, homeless families. Yes, I would agree.
And
Homeless families, but also there is a strong incline for seniors that are falling into homelessness now too.
yeah.
And Lisa, when you mentioned seniors, would you say 62 and older or 55 and older?
I would say 55 and older.
I think that leads me to another question that I had, because like I see the non-elderly disabled vouchers and the veteran affairs supportive housing, but there's such a low number of units available that are accessible units. So even when you do have a senior who's able to get into an apartment, at some point they're not going to be able to age in place there. Or if someone acquires a disability, they're not going to be able to stay in some of the units. As more as more units are getting built, is there a way to, I mean, because I know financing is just, there's not enough financing, but is there a way to incentivize some of the developers to build in more units that can be converted later, or that are more universal design now?
Yeah, the many of these various funding sources for affordable housing do essentially put incentives into their funding by giving you more points, more competitive points, so to speak. If you have more accessible units or adaptable units than is required by code, for example. Um, and so that's well known within the affordable housing development realm. When But you can definitely go farther without too much expense in that, for example, our Dunbar Tower, we have built all of our hallways, doorways, bathrooms to be wheelchair accessible. So whether or not somebody lives in an apartment who needs a wheelchair, if they have visitors or if their needs change over time, like you said, then it doesn't matter what apartment they're in, that they could get around in a wheelchair. But we also designed all of them that aren't accessible, barrier-free. They're adaptable. So we can swap out, if somebody needs us to swap out the kitchen cabinets for accessible cabinets or things like that. We put in the backing in the walls so that you could add handrails to any of the walls in every bathroom in our apartment. So we chose to do that, and many mission-driven nonprofits do that. The one thing I'll say about new construction versus existing, like we could acquire properties, renovate them, provide housing. We can do new construction. New construction is more expensive, generally speaking, especially right now as it gets more expensive. But I can hardly find a existing apartment that has accessible features, that doesn't have asbestos, that doesn't have lead-based paint. So to me, I would rather control the environment, make it more sustainable, make it more accessible on the new construction side.
And like Dunbar Towers belongs to the Housing Commission. For the ones that don't necessarily belong to the Housing Commission, are we seeing more accessible units come online with those as well, and some of those other was it, I guess affordable housing units that aren't city owned
Um, ones
or
that
the
are,
convertible units.
yeah, ones that are being built by folks like Avalon, which is a nonprofit mission based, yes. Uh, we don't really have a lot of for-profit affordable housing being built other than most recently Lockwood. They built on Ellsworth and it was actually senior housing. I haven't been in there. Lisa or Wanisha, I don't know if you've been in there, but they are a organization that definitely is building toward accessibility because they serve seniors. Um, we just don't have a lot of other developers developing affordable housing in Ann Arbor specifically.
Okay, and then just my last question before I hand it over to Hannah. You said that homeless families are, the need for them to have housing is or as affordable units is increasing. And we even before people become unhoused, we're seeing that there's a need for affordable family-sized apartments or other forms of housing. But a lot of what we're seeing come online are like one bedroom, two-bedroom apartments. Um, is there a plan on or a strategy towards building more three-bedroom apartments within the city?
Excuse me. Yes. So the one thing I haven't talked about is that we did an analysis of city-owned properties to see which were available and made sense to develop as affordable housing. Most of the city-owned properties are in the downtown. I'm sorry. One second. But some of the properties are not in the downtown. And so we talked to our residents and we talked to folks in the Bryant Community Center, families with kids to say, hey, would you move if we built family housing in the downtown? Like, would you move there if we couldn't provide parking? For example, if you had to get your own parking. Um, and a small percent said they would, but the vast majority said they would not. And so when we're doing our developments that we're doing downtown, we are doing 1 and 2 bedrooms in the downtown. The highest demand we're seeing is 1 and 2 bedrooms. And because we are giving people the choice of not to have a car, our family sites, everybody has a car. Everybody has a car and usually multiple cars. So we can only build those outside the downtown. So our most recent property that we built is on Platt Road. It's called Creekside and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 bedroom apartments. So I think the only agency that has 5 bedroom apartments, actually, to be honest. And we do have a wait list for 3, 4, and 5 bedrooms, but there is a need. Don't get me wrong, there is a need, but the wait lists are much smaller, but more desperate when you get larger families. Well, definitely. So
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, because I was just thinking about how, I mean, yes, there's downtown, but we saw on the map, there's not a lot in like Ward 3, Ward 4, Ward 2, which are more single family, really residential areas.
Yeah.
And I remember that back when there was the more affordable housing, that it was more, it was apartments that were built in like the 40s and the 70s. So yeah.
Yep.
Hannah?
Yeah, you had mentioned sustainability being an important feature of development. And I was wondering if the Housing Commission is expecting to spend more on sustainability to be in compliance with the green rental housing ordinance, not only for new developments, but will the Housing Commission need to renovate older units to be in compliance with the new ordinance?
We will not need to spend additional money to be in compliance because we already are doing it. Um, like when we converted our public housing, I had to raise all the funding to renovate those apartments. And one of my goals was sustainability because we actually include all the utilities in our rent. And so we pay all the utility bills. So from an operating perspective, it makes way more sense for us to have this conversation with Missy Stoltz all the time. Like, Missy, I personally believe in it, but as the director of the Housing Commission, it's because it saves money. You know, it's healthier for our residents and it saves money. So we aren't going to have a problem complying with our existing or our new construction because it's already part of our goal.
Are there any more questions? Well, then I just want to thank the three of you for coming here. I mean, it's not super, super late, but I do know that it's, um, outside of the normal hours, and we really appreciate the presentation. It was really informative. I think the last time I had one of the larger presentations, it was at one of the was it the community academy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's nice seeing the number of units coming online increase over time. Um, so thank you for that. Um, and we hope to make it a regular thing where at least annually we can have a presentation from the Housing Commission so that we can get the information and share the information.
Great. We are happy to be here. I'll send this presentation to Kristen and she can forward it on to you all if you're interested. Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, you guys. It was good to see you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a nice time. Oh, hey, Kimberly. How are you?
Hello.
Okay, then, and we will go back to the agenda now that we have a quorum of the voting members. And the first thing is I need someone to move to approve the agenda for tonight, please.
I'll motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Hannah, thank you, Dan.
You want-
All those in favor of approving the agenda for tonight, please unmute and say aye.
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 Thank you. All those opposed, say nay. All right, the agenda is approved for tonight. And then moving forward, next is the approval of the minutes. Um, I would for this one, it's if someone can move to approve the minutes from July, September, and October meetings. So all three, so that way we don't have to do it individually.
I'll motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kim. So please unmute and say aye if you approve of the meeting minutes from July, was it September and October?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Please unmute if you're opposed and say nay. All right, the meeting minutes have finally been approved. Yay, took us 3 meetings, but we got them. And now moving forward, we just finished the presentation from the Housing Commission, and so the next item on the agenda is the draft of the 2026 Renters Commission meeting calendar. We won't be voting on it tonight. We'll vote on it in December, the same with the with the 2026 work plan, but we did want to make sure that you were aware of the meeting dates. One thing to think about also for next month's meeting is there a month in the summer that you might want to take off from having an official Renters Commission meeting? I know that people tend to vacation in the summer, just going by previous years. It's hard to get quorum in July. And so I might make a we'll talk about it at the work plan meeting next month, but I might make a motion to amend the calendar so that we have July off in 2026. Um, are there any questions or comments about that one? Hannah?
I also support having July off. It overlaps with art fair, so there's a lot of traveling in July, so it's kind of a hectic time.
Yeah, that's what I remember from this year and last year being on the commission. Um, so I'll probably make a motion for that change. And then the next on the agenda is the 2026 work plan review. Um, sorry, the 2025 work plan review. It was something that we went over in the work plan committee meeting. Hannah, do you want to talk about what we've accomplished this year?
Yeah, give me a second so I could pull up some of the notes.
While Hannah's pulling up the notes, I will say that we did accomplish a lot this year, and I do want to credit Hannah's organization, um, because I don't think we would have had the number of tenant engagement meetings that we did without her, as well as thanking Toya for inviting us to speak with some of the caseworkers at Avalon.
Yeah, I think we hit not necessarily every item on the work plan, but a lot of them we at least started. I know at the work plan meeting last week, we agreed to remove quite a few items because we either addressed them or we're gonna prioritize other topics. I did type up a draft of the 2026 work plan that I could finish up and email everyone. And we'll fully maybe finalize some of the details on that at the work plan meeting next month. Um, but yeah, does anyone have any thoughts on our progress this year? Maybe things that we should prioritize more for next year?
I don't see any hands raised, so we'll go ahead and move forward. Um, Next on the agenda is the plan for next meeting. So far, what we have planned for December is voting on the work plan, the going, or sorry, voting on presenting and voting on the 2026 work plan, voting on the 2026 calendar, and most likely talking about the uh, rental transparency ordinance. And I think we'll have a draft of a resolution regarding the ordinance as well. If in general, it seemed like from the previous draft that we do support the rental fee or rental transparency ordinance. I think it sounds like a few things might be getting tightened up, so we may have a little bit more to be happy about, hopefully. Um, and then if the first reading is at the December 2nd meeting, the next it would be passed in December, and um, and then we'd have to look at the new ordinance to see the latest draft of the ordinance to see when it would go into effect. But a lot of our work next year would be on educating tenants and landlords about the new rental ordinance. Um, Next is reports from, we did have a report from the city council. excuse me, I had already given the report on the update on the rent transparency ordinance. We had a vacancy and Sheila Rasuli has been nominated to the Renters Commission. She's a part of the Ann Arbor Tenants Union. And so hopefully in December, she will be at the meeting, and I think then we'll have a full number of voting members between Dan coming back this month, yay, and Sheila next month. On the bylaws, they were unclear about a delay, but council members Harrison and Radina requested that staff provide them with whatever resolution language is necessary to achieve the commission requested bylaws change with respect to quorum. And Councilmember Radina followed up with City Attorney Carr this week, asking for an update and assistance in moving forward. So hopefully there'll be an update to the bylaws in case we do lose, in case our membership numbers go down again, that there'll be a way to still have quorum that doesn't require the 6 members. And then for I don't know if I mentioned this, probably not, because it happened after the last meeting, but now that I'm reading from an email, by the way. Now that we're a couple of years into the early leasing ordinance, and after getting a lot of feedback from both renters and landlords about the ELO and whether we currently have the right timeline in place, Councilmember Radina recently reached out to U of M about the possibility of surveying students about their experience with the ordinance. And he learned that CSG, the student government, is in the process of developing a student survey on housing, and they've agreed to include a very limited number of questions in the survey on the ELO ordinance. Being redundant with that, but there's a very tight deadline to submit questions, and so Councilmember Radina connected with staff to develop a few questions to help us evaluate the success of the ordinance to date. There will be more information to come once I think the questions have been submitted, and if they're approved by U of M CSG, then we should be able to learn more and have more information about how the ELO is going for students, because we've heard feedback from parents, from some students, from some of the landlords, but it'll be good to have a much broader number of students giving feedback, since that is who it affects primarily, and one of the reasons, what affects the students first tends to then affect the rest of the renters. Are there any updates from others any reports from commissioners? Commissioner Else?
I just wanted to give a shout out to the Washtenaw Housing Authority has a work group for landlords, the Landlord Advisory, and together we are hosting an event on the 5th of December, which will be held at the Learning Resource Center out by the Sheriff's Office on Washtenaw. And that event is to get resources to landlords, community resources. So resources for food, for power, for water, all of those kind of things that your tenants and renters may struggle with, especially right now. We are trying to inform landlords so that they can pass that information on to renters. So if anybody has a place that you can circulate that flyer, I'll have Kristen send the flyer in a little blurb out so that everyone can. And if anyone's listening, we hope you'll join. There is an RSVP just because we are providing a light lunch. So it starts at 11 and we'll have kind of an open house, then some tabling, and then kind of a connection at the end. So if anyone is interested, I will get Kristen the information, and feel free to share in your networks with people who work in property management or own properties. Thank you.
Thank you. And from Kristen, our staff liaison, do you have any updates for us?
No report.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll go ahead and move forward on the agenda for the second public comment.
To address the Renters Commission about any topic for up to 3 minutes, you can go ahead and raise your hand. Now, to raise your hand, you can press *9 if you've called in. You can press the raise hand feature if you've joined with the Zoom link. And then we will call on you to speak. If you'd like to address the Renters Commission, go ahead and raise your hand now. All right, no hands are raised. We can go ahead and close.
Okay, then we'll move on to the communications to the Renters Commission. The first one was about leasing ordinance violations, and it was from the Vice President of Property Management from Oxford Properties. And it's from what it sounded like is that it says amongst multiple across multiple U of M parent Facebook groups, there's possibly widespread misinformation being circulated, and prospective tenants are telling them that other landlords have allowed signing leases earlier than permitted, touring units, because current tenants aren't renewing, requesting payments or advance commitments outside what the ordinance allows, and possibly other actions that are being taken, that are occurring. I've gone through some of the groups before, not the parent groups because I'm not a U of M parent, but just certain other tenant related groups, Ann Arbor in general groups, and there does seem to be misinformation that is spread or that isn't necessarily Ann Arbor specific, because sometimes when you are in such a broad group, you have parents and people who reside in other cities, and they don't necessarily know the exact laws regarding housing within the city of Ann Arbor. Um, and I think it's something to discuss at one of the work plan sessions for next year about how to possibly combat some of that misinformation that's going around in those groups. I don't know if it means contacting the moderator to talk about, is there a way that we can maybe have it penned somewhere what the ordinance says in very easy to understand language, so that if there is a question that people are referred to that particular document, as well as a link to or how to lodge a complaint, because as you know, if it's not reported to the city, then it doesn't exist. And we need to have the data to show exactly what's happening. Um, there, I've said it before, we do have good landlords who are abiding by the rules that have been set forward, and then we have other landlords that for various reasons are not abiding by those rules, and we need to help them be able to comply with. And sometimes it's an education issue, other times it does mean a court case. Um, are there any questions or comments about that one? Hannah?
So we had put, like at the last work plan meeting, we had talked about maybe developing flyers or infographic tables about how to file complaints. I think it'd be nice to maybe specifically make graphics that are suited for social media that we could share with these groups. Because I think a visual media would be good, like an actual post. And if we could all, I don't know, create it together, make sure it's accurate, um, and share it with people online. That might help combat misinformation a little bit.
Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's helpful. I have a document that I've shared in parent spaces for years. And I mean, I think what the email says is true in that those who break the ordinance on both sides are advantaged. Both the landlord and the resident are advantaged because their unit is leased before the majority of people are looking, and they have secured a unit for their group before the majority of people are who are looking. So I think that point is something that we cannot necessarily we can't necessarily fight that, because the person who has to report it in that scenario, it doesn't help them too. I do, as a landlord who does follow it, I don't share the same concern about, I mean, I wish everyone would follow it for the sake of the renters. This was pushed for by renters. It helps renters. Honestly, it's made leasing easier as a landlord. So I do not have a perceived I'm struggling to lease places because other people are breaking the ordinance. So just sharing that perspective, I hear that's different than the author of the email, but I mean, I think the feedback that we get from CSG is helpful. And the feedback that we get from CSG is going to largely be coming from students who have only known this system. And so I've said that before, that we do have to be kind of thoughtful in our dissection of that, and make sure that I think that we're talking with the tenants union closely, because they're often talking with the renters who are negatively impacted by these kinds of things. Just that, you know, if you say, is the ELO working for you, and that's the only thing people have known, it's a tough thing. So those are kind of my two thoughts, you know, on both the situation, how we combat misinformation. But I mean, I can tell you every day I get emails saying, I'll pay you a couple of thousands of dollars for you to break that. I mean, it's a very privileged system, in that people can find ways around it who want to. And so I also think that in some sense we have to just say, we have made this, we want people to follow it, we will assign penalties, we will try to get information out there. And there are going to be people who skirt it, and I don't know that there's a lot of you know, I don't know how much we can do to kind of combat that, just to set expectations for the group, and having been in this world for well over 10 years, just to kind of give all those thoughts.
I mean, I think that basically our job is to try to teach people what the ordinance is, and to be like, hey, you know, it's in everyone's best interest, really, if we all follow the ordinance. Because even if, you know, just for the people who are like, if I'll pay you thousands if you break it, it's still where, what's to say that they're not the next person taken advantage of, right? Because now you've shown that you are willing to um, not, you're willing to skirt the law. Um, and so other things sometimes can happen with a landlord who may not be as scrupulous. From the email, like, I wasn't getting the picture that they were having a hard time leasing. It felt like they were seeing a lot of action happening in some of these groups, and they were reporting on it. Um, for the next one, it was about an ongoing noise disturbance and the property management possibly failing to act. From what I got from the email was that someone in an apartment complex, their neighbor is playing extremely loud music and is disturbing that individual's ability to peacefully reside in their unit. Unfortunately, are while there are rules about quiet hours and everything, some of it may be an actual law enforcement issue, and not necessarily a city building and rental inspections one. And so the person was, I believe, advised accordingly on that. They asked if perhaps they could get moved to a new unit, and I think that's a question that rental services may be able to answer as to, yes, you can make the request, but I don't think that even with that, it's necessarily something that can be enforced. I don't know exactly. Um, are there any questions or comments about that particular situation? Okay, then I will move forward to the last email, which had to do with someone who had a sign that was in their window, and the property management company told them, oh, to take the sign down. Unfortunately, um, and they and because they said that the sign violated city ordinances. Um, I tried reading through the city code. I'm laughing because like it was hard to make heads or tails out of it, to be honest. When looking at the regulations, the pictures, knowing what sign the person had, it's very difficult for me as a layperson to really understand it. I know that like I've been given signs from the city and like other political signs and been told that, oh, you can put it into a window. And so I do think that it's something that definitely should be followed up with by the individual who was told not to have the sign, that they couldn't put the sign up. To I hope that they do file an official complaint or form if they can, and that someone who works for the city can actually talk with them about the dimensions and what's on there. Because I like if it's what I've seen for some of the signs, I don't think it violates, but I am not a city official, and so I can't say anything for real. And while I see that there is someone who has their hand raised in the waiting room, one of the I do want to apologize, but we can only call on someone during the public comment. We have two separate public comment sessions, and so we unfortunately can't bring you in.
Rosanita, I see that John Reiser is actually in the waiting room. I don't know if he was going to give comment on this issue or anything, but I see him in the waiting room just in case he has anything to add.
I will. Where is he? Yes. Where- John, can you hear me? Oops, was he brought in? Uh-oh.
Check one.
Oh,
Sorry.
there you
Yeah.
go.
Next Monday, a colleague and myself will be meeting with council member Redina about where we are on the what I call junk fees. I don't know what the nomenclature is, but post tenancy fees or the additional fees. So that's happening. What has to happen with any new ordinance is kind of relatively new real rule is that there's an ordinance that a council member suggests or staff that suggests, and then there needs to be what's called a feasibility study regarding the impact of staff, like who's going to enforce this, how's it going to be enforced, and then they advise the administrator. So that there's a period during which the impact or potential impact to the ordinance, on building or rental housing or whomever. Like we're looking at vegetation right now, and vegetation is going to impact community standards, and vegetation might impact engineering with respect to corner clearance. So that's something you may have been tracking. But there needs to be this feasibility study that the administrator Dehoney will get once the is finalized. So that's kind of the next steps in that regard. Regarding the sign, That's free speech. And I think the sign had to do with somebody's position on the new land
It
use.
has to do, right, right. It's neighbors for more neighbors.
Whatever. I don't know if they were for or
Yeah.
against it, but yeah, it was
Mhm.
it was one of those. City's not going to enforce that. City's not going to enforce somebody's, you know, whatever it is, support the troops, or you know what I mean,
Mhm.
whatever you put it. You know, we've seen signs in people's yards or their windows. So we're not going to enforce again. There are Chapter 55 is our Uniform Development Code, which is where we regulate signage. Generally, we care when it's in the right of way and it can make the right of way, driving unsafe or people not see things. That's when we would care. I talked to our zoning ordinance on this one. I talked to Janet Farrell on this one. So it's we're not going to get involved in the regulation of that sign period.
Okay, yeah, from what I was reading in the code, it didn't seem like there was anything about what the content of a sign was, just sizing and
Right.
all of
And
that.
whether
But then it
whether the
also seemed
landlord
like it was more geared towards like, I don't
it's kind
know,
of it's kind of
it was
commercial
confusing.
signage. It's kind of
Hmm.
commercial signage. You can't have a window on Main Street and you have it 90% advertisement or whatever. It's got to have fenestration. The window's got to be a window kind of generally. You're limited at what you can do on commercial signage, but in a house or an apartment or whatever, we're not gonna regulate that.
So is it basically as long
From
as
a
it's not
zoning,
beaming out
from
a
a,
bright light right in front of cars, then it's fine? Like it's
I'm
just a
sorry?
flat sign? I said, is
Yeah,
it basically like it's, hmm?
a flat sign is free speech.
Right.
Now with respect to the bigger question is what if a landlord is making misrepresentations about what the sign ordinance is to a tenant? That's
Mhm.
kind of between the landlord and the tenant as to what I don't know what was said, or I don't know that there was an email chain on that, but it's 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 I don't know that the city's going to step in and regulate, or regulate isn't the right word, but investigate, take enforcement action on the representations between a landlord and a tenant with respect to the veracity of our sign ordinance.
Okay, yeah, we were forwarded there was an email that was forwarded to the city that that showed what the I guess the property management company
Was
had sent regarding the sign, and they asked if that was the case or not.
and they're
Um, mhm,
right, and
right.
I don't think I don't know that rental housing is going to respond to that.
Well, it looks like it wasn't sent to rental housing, that it was sent to Councilmember Redina.
Right, and then those make their way to, well, that could be, but oftentimes those make their way to Janet Farrell or Pete Held or somebody, and then we have discussions about it. I
Okay.
remember seeing it, but did it make its way to Janet or no?
From what we have, it doesn't look like it made its way there. It looks like it was an email that was sent to an email chain that was sent to Councilmember Redina and then added to the communications for the Renters Commission.
Right, and Councilmember Rodina is free to forward that email to me or forward my contact email information to that tenant.
Okay. All right. Then should I just follow up with Councilmember Redina on that?
If you'd like to, I'm never going to say yes, make more work for me, but you're free to do that. I'm taking the fifth on
Okay.
that. You're free to do
All
that.
right. Okay. Then moving forward, that was the last of
Yeah,
the
feel feel
communication.
feel feel free to say riser said forward that to him or give the tenant my contact information. I get these
Okay.
inquiries.
All right, I'll do that. Um, that was the last of the communications to the Renters Commission for tonight. Again, I just want to reiterate that if you do have a question to the Renters Commission that you'd like to verbally ask, then it has to be during the public comment portion of the agenda. If not, then what you can do is email renterscommission@a2gov.org, and that communication will get to the Renters Commission. Moving forward, the last item on our agenda for tonight is adjournment. And so with that, I would just like to tell everyone to, have enjoy the holidays, even, if you celebrate Thanksgiving. If you don't, enjoy having a day off, I hope. And we'll see you next month.
See you.